So this audit was performed at the request of the administration. It was not the board that put this together. This is something that was part of my induction plan, although it's taken far longer than we wanted it to do. We started way back in August. And we covered these areas because as a superintendent coming into a school district, you want to understand the internal controls, you want to understand what's going on, quite frankly, because you don't want to own it. And as you can see, we've got a lot of problems internally. Our internal controls, you would almost understand that we don't have any. But we also don't want to repeat some of those things. That's why we looked at construction contracts and things. As we go through construction, I think that's something that we want to look at. So the recommendations are a lot of policy things that the board can do, but it's also we have to do as administration as far as making sure we have internal controls in each of these areas. And I think one area as we go through, I think Mr. Pipkins brought it up, is clarity on the change orders. What comes to the board, threshold amounts, and those kinds of things. And I think that's really something that as we go through needs to come through because to avoid some of these other things that have been happening. I think one of the things that we did is because in the food service, we had so many questions. I think it's important that on page 11, all those items, when he was doing the performance audit, sort of fell out of what else is going on. So the district, which also is included in your packet, hired Forensic Strategic Solutions, and they are a forensic auditing firm, and they are out of Alabama. And they came in and spent several days here, as it says, interviewing current employees, people who are involved in food service, going through each of those items. And I just want you to take a look at this because it's important to understand how these things are all connected, and I can make some clarifying things to some of the questions that were there. They looked at things such as reimbursements for the gift cards, personal purchases through Florence One accounts, reimbursements specifically to the manager and assistant manager of food services. Then they also interviewed employees on something called a single unit, allegations of dinners being prepared by food service employees using district resources and purchased from the Florence Restaurant Supply. So they went through each of these and talked about who actually purchased the gift cards, and you can see under one, the employee, that food service manager, that employee, and how much each year, going all the way back to 2012 and 13, of that, totaling about $2,500. It's interesting on the next sentence, it says, we were unable to identify a district policy that prohibits the use of district funds for gift card purchases and employee incentives. So, that's clearly a policy that we have to close the gap on because that was being done. The second talks about personal purchases through Florence One accounts, and it talks about there is clear documentation that indicates that an assistant manager of food services used school accounts to make personal purchases from Florence One vendors. The vendors were paid by the district. The employer reimbursed Florence One for the personal purchases. And it goes on to talk about they can't determine the fraud because, as we'll get into, where the money was flowing. But to go back to item B, I've seen the documentation. It was clearly the address on the invoice was that employee's home address that was the invoice who would be paid to. And so that's what's got to be clear to answer that question. So yes, the district paid, but the invoice came from that employee's home address. So I wanted to clarify that. There were also personal reimbursements, and they go on to talk about further, staying and lodging nights in excess of the length of a conference. There were specifically, this ties to letter B by the dollar amount. This assistant manager was reimbursed $505, which is item B, the same amount of money, for 2 events in which she personally catered for the schools. Given her role as the assistant manager of food services, may be a conflict of interest. So you were working as an employee, but using a separate company to charge while you were as an employee, and it goes on there. The interesting part of all this is this particular part that they found. So there was this thing called a single unit. And it says, according to employees, single unit items, sold items that may have been purchased with Florence One funds. Allegedly, single unit conducted fundraisers by selling cinnamon rolls, biscuits, and pots and pans for which the funds collected were deposited by the single unit, not Florence One. We were unable to verify the allegations from records which were provided, and employees were unable to provide information regarding the vendors for whom which the goods were purchased. We were also told that the food service employees were instructed or allowed to sell special items during lunch on certain days for which the sales were not recorded. In the point of sale system and proceeds were deposited to single unit rather than the district. We were unable to verify these allegations, however, our analysis of the point of sale data identified transactions for the sale of special items. So a lot of this talks about this single unit, which was a separate bank account. We did have the ability to find a bank account, which was at PD Credit Union, but it was closed at the time that we researched it. So this particular area is where some of this stuff, where that particular items were that allowed them to put money into and do, and that is one thing that I'll get to back at the end. There were other things to hear about. The assistant food service person, with the help of others, prepared and sold dinners with products purchased by Florence One using the food service kitchen at Timrod. Again, these are interviews with employees that the firm from Alabama did. Our review of Timrod's food costs identified costs in line, though, with the district averages. Our analysis did identify, however, 3 schools whose food costs appeared above average. There were CDC, Woods, Del May, and West Florence. We were unable to further our analysis of food. What that basically says is they have a computer program that they can plug in numbers to find out if there's some discrepancies along those lines. And then finally, they talked about the Florence Restaurant Supply. According to district employees, the district made frequent purchases of small kitchen goods, catering equipment, blenders, and silver punch bowls from Florence Restaurant Supply. Our analysis of the Florence Restaurant Supply invoices identified purchase of the items of concern. Each purchase was appropriately documented and approved and included a description of the item purchased. We were unable to further our analysis as kitchen supplies were not inventoried by the food services, nor did Chartwells perform a full inventory of the kitchens when they were engaged by the district. According to the district employees, the district is in possession of the silver punch bowls. And so basically what they were trying to do is, what I'm trying to share is, for the past 6 months, I've had to sit here quietly and listen to people publicly ask me, well, you're only here 3 months, how did you make the decision to go to Chartwells? Well, finally, I get to say, this is why. This is why, and these employees came forward, and finally, and some of you were in the audience today that questioned that, so finally tonight I get to say, this is what concerned people, this is what concerned me. I am not judge, prosecutor, or anything. I turned the information over that came from employees, and that was the role. To say that again is yes, SLED did contact me yesterday. They were aware that audits were done. I did turn over these audits to them, and they are continuing their investigation.
So their recommendation. So you get recommendation, you read the recommendation part?
The recommendation, while we do not feel that the predication exists to conduct a fraud examination, we recommend strengthening policies and procedures for purchasing and reimbursement of personal purchases. Employees should be trained to identify purchases that are inconsistent with district policy. We also recommend an audit of the single unit if permitted by district policies. Such an audit may provide clarity and understanding of the employee allegations related to single unit, and that is what SLED will be looking into. Because we don't have access to that. That was a separate corporation. That was a separate bank account. That was not done anywhere by the school district.
Do you know who opened it?
I have no idea, sir.
Yeah. So you're saying that we have a separate entity internal?
We have a separate entity. I can't verify that it was, I can't say who was part of that because I don't have documentation. That's what the auditors are saying here is they can't determine anything because they don't understand where all this was being funded.
So were checks from one school district one written to that unit?
I can't confirm nor deny that allegation. I don't have that information in front of me. He wouldn't have that, he would do this on. I know that there were checks from the checkbook that we had for, the PD, credit union. There were checks written in multiple accounts, $100 for Christmas cards, $100 for Christmas bonus, things like that. So, they were written checks from that checking account and to individuals in food service. But I can't verify that the money came from Florence One, only from that account at this point.
Help me, I'm not a good accountant, so we had different, people inside different cafeterias are selling unit, what's the single unit, they were selling different things that wasn't accounted for, that went into the single unit money that was unverified by us, and that's what has been going to different schools, or?
I wanna be careful, that's why I read the
Okay,
document,
good.
I didn't conduct this, and I don't wanna make any assumptions, that's why I didn't try to give names, but that is somewhat of what I just read.
And this is what was, not here, was before.
This would have been pre-Charles, yes, I think.
So what does it mean that we feel, that we do not feel that fabrication exists?
Maybe you could ask that in a different way.
He's reading out of that thing, it's good, right? He's reading something that they say. One of those paragraphs, things of that.
Last paragraph?
And it says, yes, the recommendation.
They, based upon what they, and I don't wanna speak for them, but basically what they told me that means is they don't know how all this fits together. What they found is what they found, almost like what he's saying. He makes no judgment. He is not in a position to make a judgment, only to give you the facts of what they found and what they investigated.
So with that being said then, when it comes to, if permitted by district policies, we recommend out of single unit, where does our policy stand for single units?
I would say they would fall under.
It's not single use, but single unit.
Yeah, they didn't know, nobody really knew what this was, and that's why they said that. I think that would fall, and that might be a question for maybe the attorneys. I think that would fall in line with like booster clubs and entities that exist within our organization, but actually function outside. I would probably consider that sort of the same, but I'll let the attorneys, through the chair, maybe if they could answer this. I don't think.
Actually, but I wanna clarify, we know the booster clubs exist.
Correct.
And this sounds very much like a secret organization, and so that hasn't shown up on any districts, or any type of stuff. So
I'll
I think
refrain from my
yeah.
example, just say, sort of outside, I don't want to make a booster club bad, but I'm just saying, it's an outside unit for function, and yes, there's other characteristics of this that don't exist along
So,
those lines.
so do we know how many single units we have, let's say internal or external?
I wouldn't know the answer, so it didn't matter
Because
whether it was
if-
internal or external.
Because if it's an organization, what was the benefit to the district? That would be my big question.
I don't think there was a
Not seeing a
benefit to the
benefit.
district. I think it was, if it was not, if it was a single, listed as a single unit thing, I don't think it was a benefit to the district, it was to this single unit.
It's a profit.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
because
their own company.
whoever was,
Yeah.
whatever single unit is.
Well, I think until we know, I wanna know exactly what it is and who it is and.
I think that's why
I'd like to know also.
he turned it over to SLED, and perhaps they will
So,
investigate further, and we can.
Yeah, and I think it's important to hear the words employees, so I can confirm that I was approached by a lot of employees, especially in food service, about what was going on,
About this,
about this and even other stuff that may not even be listed here. But this is sort of why we had to conduct some of this stuff on top of it, because, I was in the district 6 months and then I'm having to deal with this.
how long was this going on, this forensic audit? It just started, when did it start?
We started the performance audit, I think we started
Late July.
late July.
So, and this was running concurrent with that?
Yeah, that would come after, the forensic came afterward, but I think that time frame really gives you an idea of, and I'll say, it, you don't have to say it, how bad our books are for him to uncover stuff and start to go through it. That's how long this is taking. Because some of this is occurring while I'm here, and, you know, now we have to fix the airplane while we're flying at 30,000 feet sort of thing, and that's not safe to do.
Yeah, we have to land.
Sometime we have to land, to go back up.
Before we crash.
The sewer.
Let's try to land.
So if I might, so I understand where we are tonight then is, and I thank you for being with us tonight, and then also with reference to the, second report that the superintendent just read from, there were very specific findings, but also some fairly specific recommendations for action and follow-up, primarily, in the realm of, policy, and particularly the, updating of the procurement policy, which is of some, and this will be for another day, but I would state, at least for tonight, that's of some curiosity, because it's my understanding that the size of our district is such that our procurement policy basically is the state procurement policy. So if we've got weaknesses in our procurement policy, then the whole state does, because we're mandated to follow that policy, which is curious. So we'll see how that works out, and we'll need to work with council on that. With respect to some of this, as I understand, you have submitted the information to the authorities, and so I guess we'll have to await the findings with respect to some of that, but in the meantime, we can certainly, work on the policy matters. But I was curious also, or at least felt it might be fruitful to the extent that it could be addressed, Dr. O'Malley, that some of these matters, in fact, have already, been addressed. For instance, credit cards. I mean, we did specifically pass a package of policy back in the fall, and so with respect to all of that, and the action that was taken by this board, you know, prior to receiving this report, do we in fact now, regarding that issue, have those gaps closed, or do you foresee that there are additional policies that we need to address in the area of credit cards and things of that nature?
Just real quick on the procurement, we are working on a new procurement code. Our procurement code was from 2008. The state's coming out with a large change to their procurement code, so we're just waiting for that document, so we'll have a new one shortly. As far as credit cards, yes, we've closed that down. Board members don't have credit cards anymore. We had several credit cards in the district. Sometimes you didn't even need it. People had the number. We've canceled all those and actually changed banks, so we cleared that out. There are strict policies on that one credit card that's in the district, who has it, who signs it out, for what amount. It's gotta be tied to a purchase order. So those things are really, it has to be signed off by multiple people. And I think that is something that came through this. Although they said a couple times that there were approvals given, if you and I are the manager, assistant manager, superintendent, BA, if the approval process is just us and we're in cahoots, that really doesn't work. So you need a separate entity to sign off as checks and balances. So I think that should be part of the policy, and a lot what we did or are doing. We had, I think it was 93 or 73 different Walmart cards in the district. And so we closed that gap down to one per school with a limit, assigned to the principal. The principal has his sole responsibility for that. Same process of who takes it in and out, but the principal is responsible for that. Those balances are checked every month to make sure that accurate the purchases that are being done, so I think we've tightened that area specifically. I think the one area that's included here is our internal controls, that he talked about from the time we look at a purchase order or wanna purchase something, all the way through to when we receive it and check is dispersed. I think those controls need to be a lot tighter, to avoid some of the things that are going on as well.
All right, so that, and I'm not really following this chronological, that was number 4, he had like 5 objectives. Now, the first 2 had to do with construction, and then I think it's also worthwhile, at least, fairly quickly, but also, if you might just briefly overview, that we have significantly changed the manner in which we're handling construction by way of having gone to RFP on both construction advisors and construction companies, and even architectural firms, and so we've revisited that system. If you would just highlight what's taken place with respect to that over the last year, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that is another area that we've tightened up, and I think we follow the legal advice of our attorneys on the process, the paperwork that needs to be instilled, and then, how we actually go out for bid. And we've had our attorneys with us all along the way that have helped us, guide us to make sure we were complying with the law. So I think even that process needs to go forward, but I would say we do need some sort of refinement, as I indicated with Mr. Pipkins had talked about change orders specifically, because that's not clear from my role when they come, when they don't come, and I think that allows us to have a little bit of a different opinion, and I think that would be something that the board would want to put in policy so it's clear.
Well, again, and I understand and appreciate that, but I think, given the significant input that board members rightfully had brought to the table tonight, I think as we conclude this report, we also need to make note that proactively things have taken place, more needs to be done, but significant addressing of some of these concerns had begun to take place. So that's 1 and 2 was the construction. It sounded like one of the findings with respect to, again, this was a policy matter, but the schools were pinched by this having to deposit funds the same day of receipt. And if you have a basketball game at the high school or football game or other late night activities, it wasn't so much intentionality, but just the clock ran out, and we need to fine tune policy. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think the policy recommendation to increase the amount's fine, but I still think we need to ensure that we do not keep large amounts of money in the schools. So I do agree there was no intentionality to get to the bank during the course of the day, especially if you're in a high school and you collect receipts at a night game. It's just something that we're gonna have to work through, how our policy has to reflect a true operation of how the district is operating, whether it's elementary, middle, or high school. So I would definitely say, that was a policy consideration that I think we should even get some recommendation from our athletic directors and our principals on that as well.
Yes, good.
And then, let me finish one more, and I'll come back to you. And then, number 5, they had looked at, pay scales and so forth, and made no significant findings, and I recall that by notation. So I wanted to at least highlight that. I felt that we needed to put that on the table along with the serious questions that have been raised. Yes, sir.
In terms of the activities after school, the procedure used to be that at the end of the night that they would take those things to the bank and put that the night drop. So that does not occur anymore.
Yeah, I believe it does occur, but I would just say that I think what we're trying to say, the spirit here is, if you're in a high school, you can get to $50 very quickly, given the large number of organizations, yearbook, whatever. So that is something that we wanna look at. Maybe athletics is something that's really solid, but there's so many other organizations in a high school, we get to that $50 threshold very quickly, depending on how many organizations you have in the school.
The reason I'm asking that is I know there was some concern at some elementary schools some years ago in terms of determining that threshold if money was being stolen. I guess more or less the question would be, are there some samples around the state we can look at and
some other school districts we work with.
I think the, sort of the incident that happened in Darlington, I guess last week, over the weekend, somebody broke into the school and stole money. You know, I think that's the intent. Don't lay it around that leaves somebody vulnerable, or a teacher responsible, or something like that. So I think when we craft the policy, we have such a large school district with different operations, we've gotta craft it that the intent of the operations is, and I think that was part of the audit findings was, it's not, it may look bad, but it's really the intent of the operation. It's not the fault of individuals or personnel intentionally doing something in that part. And I think that's sort of how we have to start crafting policies, understanding how we operate, but ensure that there are strict internal controls, so those things don't happen.
Mr. Chairman, I recall too, picking up on Board Member Pipkins, that understanding the practicality, but I think part of the concern of the, enactment of a policy such as that was just frankly the concern for the safety of our employees, that, you know, if it's known that there's money going about, that can be dangerous for employees. Yes,
And that